Hello everyone. Today I'm speaking in English because I have a guest who is from abroad. Today I'm talking to a member of European Parliament from Portugal. His name is Francisco Guerreiro, and there are more reasons why I'm talking to him. He recently publicly talked about UAP at the European Parliament. He has introduced possible EU regulations concerning UAP, and he has made a whole public meeting in European Parliament only dedicated to the UAP issues. So there you have it. Welcome, Francisco.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for standing up for this important issue in EU. And I have a few questions for you. It will take just a bit of your time.
Sure.
So my first question is that at some point you realized that you want to talk about UFOs or UAPs at the European Parliament, and I wonder what made you do this. Were you more influenced by the political talks and hearings in USA, or was it because of some scientific discoveries or some new data? Would you describe this for us?
First of all, thank you for having me and for talking about this subject in a clear and transparent way. For me, that's really relevant as a politician for us to be having an honest scientific debates on the UAP topic. My move towards this subject is not new, so I was always interested in the topic. My mother was a biologist, so she always taught me to question the status quo and to make a scientific approach to every topic in my life. So I would have any barriers on any topic, and so UAPs for me is one of those issues. So we have to look at it through a scientific lens. Making the right questions and then analyzing the right data. However, if we don't have the data, we cannot have the replies that we are searching for. And so, obviously, my action, because the parliamentary work started in 2019 and it's now ending in 2024, so we have European elections in July. I hope you will all vote because it's also very important for you to vote. But it was also motivated by the hearings in the US, where a bipartisan group pushed for hearings talking about specialists on this area. And so I also managed to add several meetings here in the European Parliament with several NGOs and institutions to talk about the subject, to understand what were their doubts. And one thing that popped up is that although it seems to have in the regulation of civil aviation a procedure to talk about UAPs, it's not concretely through the lens of a special phenomena. So it's more on the safety issue. But I talked with several pilots and they don't feel safe to report it. Some of them don't even knew this was a possibility. So there's clearly a miscommunication between institutions and professionals on the civil aviation. But I would also like to have a more broader perspective on the topic. So because these phenomena also happened at sea, also happened in space, and here in the European Union, we have a different approach from the US because the civil and space is more controlled and harmonized by the military, so they have a different approach. And here, because we are not a federation in the European Union, the civil space is coordinated and organized at the EU level, the space also, but through the military lens, it's more a national competence. So there are several layers that don't communicate with each other. And so I thought it would be interesting to search a bit more and to push this topic further and make it more available to the common citizen, so to say, and also not being afraid of talking about the subject because we now have a scientific community that is talking more open about the subject. we see some data that it's not explainable, and so we have to understand, do we have to have more investment to have better tools to monitor and analyze this phenomena? Do we have to have more access to this data to really understand what is going on? Do we need more scientists analyzing this data to try to understand if it's natural phenomena, human phenomena, or other considerations? And so there are many questions that arise from this approach on UAPs, also here in the European Union, and that's why I started to make the questions to the Commission. I made an event here also in the European Parliament, as you stated, and I made a resolution, an individual motion for resolution to create this upgrade on the regulation of civil aviation to really encompass the monitoring and reporting of UAPs, and to update the legislations that we have here in the European Union, so the pilots, at least the civil pilots, can have a clear understanding of the safe space that they have to report these events, which now we don't have it.
Yeah, that's amazing, and hopefully this change to legislation will come. And how is it going at the moment? Could you a bit describe it more? What did you propose, and how is it looking? Is it gonna pass, and how should it pass?
Yeah, so first of all, I've made several questions to the European Commission. Some of them are being replied. They have been replied, but there's a gap between their reply and the reality, because I talked to a lot of pilots and they don't know that there's a mechanism to report these events, and they are mainly informed that they can report it if it's a safety issue, and sometimes it's not a safety problem because they see an object far away, they don't feel that it threatens them, and so they also don't feel safe to talk about it because of the probably professional repercussions, and so they don't even know afterwards what the methodology is to analyze this phenomena. So it's not transparent, it's not clear, it's not safe for very professional and experienced professionals to talk about it. So there's a gap between the replies of the Commission and what really happens in the ground and in the daily life of these professionals. And I also, this is being replied because it's a question that it's public that is public to everyone. So if you look at the parliamentary website on my page, you see there the questionings and the replies. But I also had the events here on the European Parliament, which was made by me, that also wanted to decrease the stigma of the subject and tried to open the debate to more parliamentarians. But we are in election year. We know that there's a lot of noise surrounding this topic. And so that's why I did not have any big support from other groups, although I know there are several MEPs that are very interested in the topic. But I will assume that because it's election time, they are afraid of talking about it. I really don't know why, but I assume that's the state of play. And so I made an individual motion for resolution, which is a small proposal of legislation that now goes to a specific committee of a subcommittee of defense, or the committee of internal markets, where is normally where regulation of civil aviation is debated. And the chair of that committee and the sub-chairs of each group decide if this individual motion for resolution is passed and then debated on the committee or not. Normally, because individual motions for resolutions are individual positions of members, if they don't have the support of the groups, they are rejected. Since we are in the end of the mandate, I don't see it being debated now, probably in the next committee, whatever it may be, because it's the parliamentary service that indicates to which committee the individual motion goes to be evaluated. But so in the beginning of the next mandate, we'll see if it's rejected or if it passes. And let's see, there's a lot of, I would say, concern to talk about the issue, because there's a lot of noise surrounding. We know how it goes, conspiracies and weird theories, and politicians are I don't know why, very afraid of talking about this subject. We see that that's a different path, for example, that is happening in the US, where politicians from the bigger two parties are aligning themselves and talking about the subject in a very scientific and transparent way, which I think it should also be debated here in the European Parliament. And so this is the state of play now here in the European Parliament, understanding also that, as I told, we are finalizing the parliamentary agenda. So we have just this week now in Brussels and the other one in Strasbourg, and we have the final votes, and then we enter a period of campaign, and so a new parliament and a new commission in the next year, in the end of this year, sorry, will be elected, and well, they will run the show for the next 5 years. I won't be running, so I won't be pushing this topic further, but obviously I will help in any way that I can if it's required for me to do so. So I'll always be open to the topic, of course.
Yeah, I mean, because of the maybe because of the that nobody talking about it, there are such conspiracies and stuff like this. When people will start to talk about it, not be afraid of it. I mean, these things should decrease, and we should get to the truth, hopefully.
Sure.
And so you made also one really nice event in the EU Parliament, which was called UAP, Reporting and Scientific Assessment. And I would like you, if you could summarize some important points. I mean, probably not everyone has the time to watch it or
Sure.
doesn't speak English. So if you could say something about that, and what was the intention behind it? Was it for EU people to take it more seriously, or was it more for the general public? What was the idea behind it?
Yeah, so very interesting question. For me, it had two main objectives. First of all, to decrease the level of stigma surrounding the topic. Although it was an individual event by me with keynote speakers that were really good, I will tell it in a second. It was not promoted by a lot of groups or even other MEPs, but it had that scope because it was by a member of the parliament, because it was inside the European Parliament, to decrease the stigma surrounding the topic. So I think on that level, it required some courage, because I also had some comments of people saying, oh, why are you doing this now? It's in the end of the mandate. You probably have some negative media outcome and people can talk about it. And I said, well, I do this as I do every other subject that I work on, through a scientific lens, through a credible lens. And so we are just making questions and debating with credible people, a topic that is very dear to the European citizens. I had a huge feedback, a positive feedback from the citizens, a lot of NGOs. They are really hopeful of the developments here in the European Union, because there's nothing happening. So that kind of opened the door to this kind of decrease of stigma. And so other MEPs and institutions can push further this topic. And the second one was to really understand how the EU is talking about the subject, because there's some national competence and institutions that already cover the topic. For example, in France, you have an institution that talks and analyzes these topics, but you don't have it at the EU level. Other nation states don't really care about the subject, for example. And so this is very diverse. It's a mosaic with a lot of different aspects. And then you have the space part, the sea, the civil aviation, but also the military. So they are not combining and they don't really talk about each other. And so the event was to talk about the EU experience and data on these UAPs. That's why we had Eduardo Rosso that talked about the historical context of it. Then we had André Jol from the UAP Netherlands organization that's basically stated and explained what it is and UAP, what's being debated around the world, what are the new data surrounding the topic. Then we had a scientific presentation on how could we analyze these UAPs through the scientist Beatriz Villarroel. That was also very interesting. So trying to bring the scientific community to the debates, which is essential. And then we had by Zoom the participation of Ryan Graves, talking about the developments in the US, their push to more disclosure, to better data access, and the fights that are happening in the political sphere to push further or to continue as it is on the topic. And we ended by pilot, civil aviation pilot, Christian van Eist, that talked about his experience, what he has saw in the thousands of hours of flight that he had, and his needs as a EU citizen to have this reporting system that is clear, that is that has a methodology behind it, that he knows where his complaint is going to be analyzed, how it is going to be treated, and in the end, a safe place for pilots that don't know what they are seeing, and they are very professional, so they do know what is a fight or flight, what is a natural phenomena, so they have thousands of hours of experience, and so they sometimes see things they don't know how to explain, and they want to report it. And they want that reporting to be safe, to be professionally analyzed, and then to have some repercussion. Can we categorize it as a UAP? If we can, how can we improve our method to understand what it is? Because if you don't know what it is, if it's human nature-based, something is. Should we improve our mechanisms to monitor these events and really go into deep understanding of what it is, to really understand if it's human or natural or other thing else? Or do we open the door to really have concrete data that is a thing that it's not explainable by our understanding, and so we have to assess it with more scientific data and probably a multi-layer community of scientists and organizations, what it is. And that opens the door to a lot of discussions, obviously. And so that was the last intervention, and then we opened the debate to some Q&As that were made by the public, that some organizations and entities that were also there present, and it can be seen on my YouTube. It's Francisco Guerreiro Multimedia, and it has more than 20,000 views, so it has a lot of traction, and thankfully it has a very positive impact, and that was one of the objectives, to have a good impact, to openly debate about the subject, and to give space to other entities and personalities to share their views, share their opinions.
Yeah, I personally really like the pilot, and I also really like that you put the person who was talking about the history of it all. Those two parts were my favorite, and if people can, I recommend going to your channel and watching it. Are you aware of International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because this is the only, only organization I'm in contact with, because we have even one member in Czech Republic. You probably know Francisco Correa,
yes.
and so on. So I was just curious if you are in connection.
I'll be happy to connect or reconnect or double the connection, whatever you want to call it, because I had several connections with a lot of NGOs. So sometimes I lose track of it. Sorry. But that also shows that there's a really good feedback on the civil society, and that citizens should be aware of this topic and should press their politicians to talk about this topic in a very open way.
Yeah, of course. And so lastly, I would like to talk about what are the maybe next steps to help have people talk about these things in EU and Europe, because in Europe it is not really talked about much. So what can we do to so that EU takes these issues more seriously concerning UFOs and UAPs? What can the general public do maybe?
Well, you can organize if you are not organized in a coalition, in a group, in a movement, and then talk to your politicians, to your representatives on the subject. So set up a meeting, try to explain what is at stake, what is happening, what are the developments here in the EU, and then try to analyze with them if they are interested in the topic, if they can make some efforts to have more broader understanding of it, and then you kind of understand if they are into the topic or not. And sometimes the curiosity arises, and then you make that connection for your national members or European elected members, and then the follow work will happen. So if they want to make an event, for example, in the specific committee talking about the subject, you have to gather political strength and support. So that can happen if you have the will to do it. You can make more questions to the Commission. You can push for different regulations to be upgraded. You can make more events on the topic on the UAP with more political parties. And so there's a lot of things that you can do if you have the political will. I think the most concerning thing is to find someone that has the courage to continue this topic in a credible way, because it might happen also that some crazy politicians may pick up this topic just to try to undermine the European Union and to say there's some deep state involved in this topic and some conspiracy stuff that's normally tends to be associated with the far right here in the European Parliament. That's one of my main concerns, that this topic is hijacked by some crazy conspiracy politician. Otherwise, it's a topic that should be debated as any other topic in a scientific way, in an open way, in a transparent way, with civil society, with agencies, with different political groups. And I also know, because I've debated and talked with some of these agencies, that even in the European Union, a lot of people that are in the EU institutions want to debate this topic further. They want to have more developments surrounding unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs. And so there's several institutions and thousands of EU citizens that want to push to this topic. Just need to find some politicians that are willing to go forward and probably help them on the path, because sometimes they can be misleaded, they can they don't know it's the current update on the situation, they don't know how to navigate the world phenomena and the world events that are happening, because this is being debated not only in the US but in several other nations and regions. And so support these politicians if they are willing to go forward with this topic. And then, well, it's as I told, it's more political will than anything else. If you have the political will, you'll find a way, you'll find ways to push for the topic in a very constructive way. If not, you may find out that, the majority of the politicians are afraid of the topic, or they are some kind of crazy nuts that will use this topic to undermine the EU institutions. It may happen.
I mean, some people may be like, yeah, voting doesn't matter, but I heard one quote not long ago that cynicism is just an excuse for not doing anything and not helping things. But there are ways to even help this issue, talk to, maybe send an email to some politician or something, and things can start moving, hopefully.
Yeah, and sometimes it can happen. For example, I would feel that for some groups or parties, this is a topic that is not friendly to be debated now on the campaign. But if you have a connection with some politicians that are on the lists, and then you can have like bilateral talks with a compromise in off that they will work on the topic. That could also lead for your community to know, okay, this group and these politicians are willing to open the door if they are elected to this topic, although there's not a specific compromise on the program. Sometimes, well, we have to work with what we have, and then you can all mobilize to vote on that group, and then afterwards press him to do something. Because voting is very important. The European elections, at least in my country, Portugal, has a tendency of high abstention, and we have more than 70% of the national legislation that is decided here in the European Parliament, in the Brussels institutions, and that's why it's important to have people that are concerned with the environment, that are concerned with freedom, that are concerned with decreasing the economic inequality, and so you should mobilize to vote, because it's very important to have young minds, progressive minds, ecological minds here in the European Parliament for us to really cope with the challenges that we have as nations and as the EU institution that is imperfect by nature, as any human institution, but it's a wonderful project that really combines the best of humanity, and it's not painted as some far right and some far left depicted as a project that is totalitarian and wants to remove all freedoms and so on and so forth. It's the other way around, and so it takes a lot of negotiations, it takes a lot of debates, it takes a lot of analysis to really try to reach the balanced approach on several topics. And we do see, if you leave the European Union and you go to other regions, you see that we live in a bubble. And we should export this kind of progress and improve it, obviously, but not undermine it and say that national states now will have their will if they fight alone in this globalized world. So that's just nonsensical. Also because we are one species, and again, we are always see us by tribalism. So I'm Portuguese, you are Czech, I'm brown, you are white, I'm a girl, you are LGBT, this and that. Obviously, we have issues. We are not the same, but we are more close to each other than separated. So vote, mobilize, and again, thanks for this interview. That was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really nice to see that there's something happening in EU. I'm trying to cover lots of news about UAPs generally, and then nothing in EU, and then suddenly, something to report on. So thank you so much for this.
No, it's okay. It's my pleasure, and it's my duty also. So thanks a lot.